What is up guys, Deadset here. Patch 2.1 is hopefully coming to a close, so I thought what better way to send it off than to give you a good look into one of the most powerful specs that arose with the season, the Condemn Crusader. This video consists of a breakdown of the skill set and gear that I use in two vastly different situations, the first being Torment 6 farming and the latter Greater Rift progression. Of course, there are certain basics of the build that remain static. I will go through them first. The backbone of every noteworthy Crusader is, of course, his account set. There's a notable variation in the helm slot between Torment and Greater Rift farming, so in the basics section I'll give you examples of good rolls on the other 5 slots. As you can see, I opt for resistances and vitality on the tanky slots like pants and boots, a trifecta of crit chance, crit damage and cooldown reduction on the glove, and skill bonuses on both the chest and the shoulder. I prefer the Glacier setup for my softcore character, though I encourage you to stick to reduced damage against elites on the chest and all resistance on the shoulder if you're playing hardcore. Stone of Jordan with holy damage is a very impactful addition to your overall damage output. A perfect roll would be one with natural socket or high cooldown reduction, so you can reroll the strength into a missing stat. Such rings are extremely rare though, and as you can see in the demonstration, I use a common holy roll, making up the cooldown reduction with a Leoric crown during Torment farming or a Flavor of Time amulet during Greater Rift progression. Blade of Prophecy is the mandatory weapon of the build, which is a welcome variation to the Furnace heavy metagame, and certainly more common. In ideal conditions, also known as massive fights, this two-handed sword triples your damage with additional Condemn explosions. Fridar's Wrath is the seasonal newcomer, a shield that turns the otherwise cooldown-based nature of Condemn into a spender, an extremely potent effect as proven by the Fires of Heaven rune from the Holy Shotgun build. To top things off, it has a badass angelic design that fits the holy theme perfectly. I prefer to go with a strength, vitality, cooldown reduction and crit chance roll like the one in the demonstration. If you make up the toughness elsewhere, you can replace the vitality with an additional Condemn roll or the utility-oriented Wrath regen. But do keep in mind, this is another potential 700 vitality down the drain. 40 Wrath is no cost to scoff at, and Laws of Valor with the Unstoppable Force rune, cutting down those costs in half, will prove to be a trustworthy friend. That's doubly true for Greater Rifts, where the prolonged nature of fights can leave you Wrath-starved. In Torment farming, there's merit in the critical rune, since you'll destroy enemies at a breakneck pace. If you're playing lazy like myself, however, stick to Unstoppable Force, and you can forget what Wrath issues actually means. Provoke with Too Scared to Run is a Swiss knife of a skill that I've spared no words praising in the past. It's a generator, a debuff tool, and a way to keep fleeting enemies glued to your deadly condemns. At this point, I doubt anyone can tell what I'm playing if I'm not a towering shape of metal, achieved of course through Akarat's Champion, our strongest self buff. Made permanent by the account 6-piece bonus and made sturdier with the Prophet rune, this skill will take you places, with 35% damage bonus, Wrath regen, 150% extra armor, and a free life on top. Heavenly Strength is a natural choice with the Blade of Prophecy in hand, allowing us to wield Fridar's Wrath in the other. Finery is another mainstay for Crusaders, with sockets ever growing in number each patch. I pick Indestructible as my third core passive. It's an emergency tool for a spec that fights at a painfully close range, and especially in late Greater Rifts, you'll find yourself in situations where even the second life of Prophet is not quite enough. There is one gem to rule them all in this build, Myrinae, Teardrop of the Star Weaver. Upgrade this beauty to a high enough level, stack holy damage across the gear, and watch hundreds of millions of damage drop from the sky. Regardless if you plan to cut through Torment like butter or try your hand at a Greater Rift, adding this gem to jewelry is your first job. Few legendary gems rival the usefulness of Bane of the Trapped, and along with Myrinae, I consider this gem mandatory for a Condemn setup. Being its own separate damage multiplier makes this gem incredibly potent, and any spec that can somehow trigger it usually fits it in. Condemn is no exception. In the core section, I stick to main stat and movement speed up to the 25% cap. In offense, I go with cooldown reduction, crit damage and crit chance in that order, In defense, I increase all resistance first and boost life percentage and armor later, and in utility, I go with area damage, resource cost reduction, and life per hit. Alright, let's talk a bit about the farming setup, since you'll be spending the majority of your time farming Torment 6 in search of gear perfection. As I mentioned, the helm slot has a notable variation. In order to free up a slot without a cooldown reduction roll, I'm using a Leoric's Crown to double the effect of my cooldown reduction gem and a Ring of Royal Grandeur to maintain my 6-piece account bonus. I highly recommend doing Act 1 bounties until you get a satisfactory Grandeur ring with a natural socket or high CDR, so you can reroll a stat that you don't need and accomplish a roll similar to the one in the demonstration. The reason for the aforementioned gear choice is to enable us to equip a Harrington's Waistguard belt. The unique property of that piece more than doubles your damage for a 10-second period after you open a chest. The Diablo term for chest is very loose though. Any type of container will do. Dead bodies, bookshelves, tree logs will all trigger that effect. They are abundant in adventure mode but very sparse in greater rifts, and thus I prefer this build only for regular farming. The final piece of the gear puzzle is the often overlooked Warzetian Armguard Bracer. A well-equipped Crusader will cut through Torment 6 at a pace of a single Condemn per pack of enemies, making strong arm bracers overkill for the difficulty. The Warzetians, procced by Condemn's or Wreath of Lightning legendary gem, will grant you bursts of speed that reduce farming runs to 3 minutes on average. To further our focus on efficiency in Torment 6, I pick Condemn with the Unleashed rune as the primary damage dealer of the spec. Skipping the 3-second wind-up of regular Condemns and damaging the enemy instantly, Unleashed is unparalleled at speed clearing. Naturally, Unleashed dumps Wrath at an alarming rate, so I stabilize my resources with the use of a generator. Unlike the majority of our spenders, Condemn does not have a casting animation, leaving the perfect opening for the otherwise ignored primary skills. My usual choice is Slash with Zeal for the additional attack speed and thus faster Wrath build-up, but options like Smite with Reaping and Punish with Retaliate can offer you healing utility or a higher Mirinae proc rate, so I encourage your experimentation. Finally, I leave a slot for mobility. Steed Charge with Endurance is a wonderful tool for bounties and winding rifts, especially if you take the time to swap between Blade of Prophecy and a Swift Mount Flail that doubles the duration of your horse. I highly encourage you to keep one in your inventory and grow a habit of using it, as it will cut down the time of cash farming substantially. As a fourth passive in regular Torments, I use Holy Cause. The healing is a nice extra for this dedicated holy spec, but the real reason to pick it is to bolster my upfront burst and be done with enemies as quickly as possible. Wreath of Lightning is my third gem of choice for regular farming. While I don't focus on lightning damage, which is the elemental type this gem scales with, when sufficiently upgraded it melts normal enemies regardless, and it speeds me up, because of its level 25 property and because it strikes the destructible environment and procs my Warzetians. Now that we've taken a look at speed farming, let's shift the focus to the 2.1 challenge, soloing Greater Rifts, and the necessary changes to your gear and skills. Necessary does not even begin to describe the double unity combo, one for yourself and one for your follower, along with an immortality relic for him, reducing the incoming damage by half. Without this setup, your chances to progress beyond Greater Rift level 35 are close to none. For yourself, aim for a roll similar to the one shown in the demonstration, with Natural Socket allowing you to reroll the strength into CDR. Any unity will do for the follower, even a sub-level 71. The Strong Arm Bracer with holy damage and as high of a percentage on the legendary property as you can find is the preferred bracer of the Greater Rift setup. Don't be fooled by the knockback requirement. The Vacuum Condemn procs the bracer despite its pulling effect. Finally, in our eternal struggle to hit the 56% CDR breakpoint, we'll be using a Vigilante belt, ideally with all resistance and 8% CDR. Our primary damage dealer, Condemn, takes on a crowd controlling role with the Vacuum rune. This choice not only procs the Strong Arm Bracer, but also the Bane of the Trapped legendary gem, further amplifying the damage potential of the build at the cost of a 3-second wind-up. Learn to appreciate not only the strengths of this choice, however. Being careful around electrified and fire chains elites or outright skipping them in unfavorable situations should become second nature if you want to make good time in Greater Rifts. In the place of a primary, I run a second crowd controller. Inspired by Korean player Danta, I started including Shield Glare with Divine Verdict in my setups to regularly shut down the highly lethal enemies of high Greater Rifts, along with some nice damage amplification on top. Replacing our beloved horse mobility for invaluable damage reduction, I grew to love Iron Skin with the Flash rune. Similarly to Provoke, it's a Swiss knife skill. It can halve the incoming hurt, speed you up with a simple proc requirement, and even burst you through walls of Waller elites. Along with the Kool-Aid potion, this has saved my butt on numerous occasions. As a fourth passive in Greater Rifts, I make use of Long Arm of the Law, making my Unstoppable Force rune an almost constant companion and easing the life of this generatorless setup. Finally, if you've perfected your jewelry, both the SOJ and the Unity, you can include Taeguk as the third gem. An alright source of both toughness and damage, if you can manage to keep the stacks. Condemn is well suited to utilize this gem, requiring no casting animation and allowing you to move freely while stacking Taeguk up. Because of my imperfect Stone of Jordan, I deprive myself of a third gem and use the helpful Flavor of Time that allows me to keep my SOJ with my gear. Once I perfect the ring slots, I will make the switch to a crit chance, crit damage, holy damage and socket amulet. Well, this about covers my usual choices for the Condemn build, both from a gear and skill choice standpoint. I hope this guide is useful to you in your future farming sessions or ladder pushes, and if it was, I would appreciate your subscription to my channel. Talk to me on Twitter and Facebook that I'll link below, see me live at twitch.tv/thedeadset, and I'll see you guys next time.